pop-up stage today. It is going to be a proscenium stage, so that way you guys will have a little bit more tools for you to study at home to get ready for your test, and you can kind of physically see one in a 3D kind of way, so you understand what a proscenium stage is a little better. Okay, so supplies you're going to need today can be regular notebook paper, printer paper. It can be cardstock, which is what I use because it stands up a little firmer. And sometimes I even use index cards for all the little pieces. Okay, you're going to need a pair of scissors. It doesn't matter what kind, as long as they cut. And I use stick glue. Okay, don't use hot glue. It leaves strings everywhere. It's a big no-no. And don't use tape because it'll look really, really messy. And it'll come off after a while. So I would not suggest using that. All right. And of course, something to write with. It doesn't matter what. I have erasable pens, so I just like the way pen looks better. Okay. Because you'll be using those to label with. So if you have a ruler, it might be a little helpful just so things are even. I don't use rulers most of the time, at least not right now. I use whatever I have around me. So for my straight edges, I grabbed whatever was close by, like a notepad that I can use that has stiff edges. And then for some of my measurements, I used like a notepad in order to have a size. Okay, so again, you grab whatever you need to in order to make this work for you. If you want to just eyeball it, that's good too. Okay, so you're going to need one full piece for your stage floor, and then I used around 3 pieces for all my stage parts. All right, I would keep some extra just in case you mess up, but again, it's simple shapes like squares and rectangles. So we are going to start off. You can put that full sheet by itself for now. And what you're going to do is you are first going to make your proscenium arch. All right, so remember that's that picture frame that goes around the front of the stage. So I use my handy dandy little notepad over here that I showed you guys earlier because I figured it was a great size for the opening of my stage. You are going to use the full length of your paper because it meets up nice and close to the edge. So I took this little guy, and again, you can eyeball it, and I put it right down against it, and I just traced it. Okay, so now I have my opening for my proscenium arch, and then I went about 1 inch. So if you take your thumb, and from the edge of your thumb to about the crease, that's just about 1 inch. So when you're looking to roughly measure something, that's a good thing to use. Okay, so about 1 inch on the sides and about 1 inch on the top. Okay, so you're gonna make a few marks at the top at 1 inch, and you're gonna draw a line across it. I used that notebook that I showed you guys a little while ago, the really long one. You can even use a folded piece of paper. If you have cardstock, that works just as well because it stays nice and stiff. A book, okay? And you're gonna draw that. And in theater, we like to use as much of our material as possible so that we are reducing anything that we're throwing away because in theater, sets and everything cost money, so we try to save as much as we can. Okay, so at the very top, I went ahead and I used my notebook again, and I used it as a measuring tool this time. Okay, so all I did was I took it from the bottom and I went up to that height and I marked it on my notepad. So if you look, you can see that little dash up here. That's how tall my proscenium arch is. Okay, and then there is a little mark down here because I don't want it the full width of this. I want it about half this, maybe a little less, okay, because it's going to make our curtains. And if you even have this size of notepad, you can even just tear off these pieces and use that as your curtains. That'll work great too, okay? You'll just cut them to the height of your proscenium. So I took it and I measured, okay, and I marked it, and I went here and said, okay, that's how high it is. So I take it to the very top line of my proscenium, and I make a little mark there, and then I just go across, line it up for the edge of my other little tick mark here for how wide I want my curtains, and I just traced that section. I then did it 2 more times. Okay, now remember, you have 6 curtains on your stage, so you're going to need 6. Okay, so you have your first 3 for one side of your stage, and then on another sheet. And why I didn't use just 2 sheets, because honestly I could have, I just noticed that. You are going, actually never mind, cross that out. You are going to do that again a few more times. Okay, so you have a total of 6 rectangles that you'll be cutting out. This piece, do not throw away. You are going to be able to use it. Okay. And then what is left over down here, you are actually going to keep, because that is another piece of our stage. The very last thing you're going to draw out before you start cutting everything is going to be that apron, that little curved section in front of your stage. If you have something that's a pretty good size to trace half a circle, you can go ahead and use that. You can also even use a string or a shoelace. And if you tie one end to whatever you're writing with about midway or so, and then you hold the string at the bottom of your paper, you can actually make yourself a half circle. Okay, I tend to wiggle a lot when I do that, so I don't do that. So I tend to eyeball my circles, and I don't really care if it's perfect or not. As long as I can tell what it's supposed to be, you're good. Okay, so what I did is you only need about 2.5 inches. So mark from your center of the paper, and you're going to make a little tick mark. Okay, and then what I did is I just carefully, when you're sketching, you do slight lines, and I went from the center out this way, and then I did my best to mirror on the other side to get my half circle. If you notice, guys, it is not perfect. I don't care. It's just a representation. All right, now I'm not saying I'll make it all jig-jaggy or anything like that, but do your best. I'm not worried about any lines that are messed up or anything, because honestly, when I cut it out, I can flip it over on the other side and I'm not going to see any of it. Okay, so your next step after you have all this stuff drawn out, you are then going to cut everything out. Okay, so go ahead, you can go ahead and pause this video, and because the next time you'll see all the pieces cut out, and then we're going to go ahead and label those before we actually put them together. So take the time now, go ahead and pause the video, and I'll probably put in a song or something here so you guys can listen. I don't know what I'm going to put. Again, you never know what's going to come on. Okay, so okay. So now you should have all your pieces cut out, and I have all mine right here in a little stack. Here's that leftover piece from earlier that I said you're going to need. You can go ahead right now and cut this guy long ways. Actually, you can probably cut this guy in half first, because we're not going to need it all. Okay, and then go ahead and cut him in half. So you have a nice little sliver. All right, before we start gluing all this together, we are actually going to label our pieces. Okay, so maybe as we're labeling, you'll start to get an idea of where things are going to go on your stage. So I'm going to lower this a little bit. This little guy right here, again, it doesn't matter which side you use. I go for the cleanest one. You are going to label it the fly rail. Make sure it is nice and legible so you can actually see it for yourself. We could just draw this on our floor on here, but I like anything that is physically 3D to be at least a little bit, so we know it's not literally on the floor. Okay, so fly rail. We have our proscenium arch. Remember, guys, I would go ahead and look at your vocab to make sure you're spelling it right just for this purpose, so it's nice and pretty. And you know the full name. Okay, it's a nice little practice. Okay, proscenium arch. Now we have all these guys. These are all our legs. You can label them individually if you want to. I do sometimes. I think for this round it might be a good idea because I think I'm going to have you guys go ahead and label your actual stage directions or your stage areas also on this so you can see that physically as well. So let's go ahead and mark these as legs. You can make them at the top, up here. You can write it fully across. I don't care, as long as you see it. So remember, there are 6 of those. And if you guys want to get all fancy, you can always use markers or colored pens for all your different things. I just don't want to right now. Normally I would. I would even do them probably as black colored paper so you see your actual curtains on stage, but I just didn't feel like getting it out today. So white paper it is. So generally, if we're making a model out of white, it is called a white model. And if you guys enter Theater 2 next year, they actually create white models. So they don't have to actually worry about creating a little 3D model and painting it or anything like that. And then in advanced class, they actually go into painting and drawing and coloring everything that is on that set that they make. You guys have it easy this year because your little set design is going to be either a foldable or something even easier. So the next little guy I have coming up is going to be my apron. And I can tell right now I don't like that because this is like really skinny and it bothers me. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to make him a little fatter just because it bothers me. So now it feels a little better. Okay, and there will be sections that we label on the actual floor a little later, but we're gonna need this stuff put down first. All right, so you have your apron. And then this really big piece that was left over is actually something that goes towards the back of our stage, and that is called the cyc. You don't have to put cyclorama. I am okay with shortening it up to cyc, which is C-Y-C. Okay, kind of like just saying psych, but yeah. So just write that on the back, and remember, it's for lighting people. All right, so we have these. And I would like to point out, there's a couple of things that I forgot. It is going to be another curtain. So you can use the part that you actually cut out your frame of your proscenium arch. Okay, this is perfect. It'll work. So you're just gonna cut that guy right in half. Doesn't have to be exact. Just eyeball it. because I guarantee my straight edges are going to be the ones that show. And my curved ones are going to be hiding. Okay, so there we go. Now this goes directly behind our proscenium arch. This is that one curtain that closes in the beginning, or it even raises up sometimes. Most of the time we don't even close them anymore. But this is our grand drape. So generally when I am labeling these, I do grand and then drape on the other one. Okay, it is completely up to you how you want to do it. I generally want to label them across the edges because you'll see in a second when we're gluing this, not all of this is going to show. Okay, so I do one side with grand and the other side with drape. Okay, and that part where I noticed that I wrote it on the curved side and not the side I actually wanted it on. There we go. All right, so now we have our labeled grand drape, okay? So now we start to actually put stuff together. So you're going to take your full piece, which is your stage floor, and is going to lay flat just like that. It is not going to be long ways or widthwise, okay? It is nice and long, okay? So there's your stage floor that is now laying down, and I'm going to lower this. I will show you guys as I am gluing them down so you can kind of see. I don't have the best setup here right now. Took a long time to get my cameras and stuff set up, so it's not going to happen today. It will happen for future videos that I have to make. Okay, so the very first thing that I like to glue down is my apron, because it lets me know how far back my proscenium arch has to be, and everything is based off of that. So you're going to find your curved apron piece, and you are going to glue it about ½ an inch or so up from the bottom. Okay, just right dab in the center. You don't have to put crazy amounts of glue. I know in kindergarten a lot of kids just everywhere. And I do prefer using this versus liquid glue because it slides on you. And then sometimes if you do put too much, it gets really messy really quick. So I just go around my edge. And the flat side goes upwards. Okay, and give that a nice little press down. Okay, so now you have that glued directly on your paper. From here, we're going to start putting our proscenium arch on. And I know some of you guys are all like, but Miss, how are we going to glue that down? It's flat. Pop up, remember? So you're going to look at your two bottom edges of your proscenium arch, and you're actually going to fold those in. Try to make them as even as possible across. And whenever you fold the rest of your stuff, make sure they're all folded the same direction so it lays down like it's supposed to when you want to put it away. So I go about ½ an inch or so folded on each one, and you can adjust it. One good thing that you might think of doing is go ahead and glue the edges before you fold it and place them down on the stage floor. So you're only putting glue for about ½ an inch on the bottoms, okay, right down here. And you're going to take it and line it up with the top of your apron on the sides, because you remember it meets right there. And you're going to glue those edges down. So it should meet up nice and neat along the edges of your paper because it is the exact same width. Okay, so if you notice right now, it looks like that. So all I have to do is take this guy and fold him back this way. And I have my proscenium arch. Okay, from here, and those flaps are back here, you are going to start putting the legs down. Okay, and depending on your glue, mine is being difficult. It may be because I have the fan on and it's drying way faster than I want it to, but I'm going to really put a good amount on there so it'll stay. Plus, I'm using my daughter's glue. Who knows how long she's had it open. All right, we're going to come to our, actually, you know what? Let's do our grand drape first. Grand drape. Make sure grand is going on your left side, or your right side, I should say, because it'll be read that way. And drape is on the other side. But as long as you understand it, okay, that's all that matters. So you're going to take this guy, and you are going to glue them to the back of your proscenium arch. Line up the edges, and you're going to glue them on to the back. Okay, so they should be against the bottom of your paper, nice and pretty. All right, so got our lovely little glue stick. I tend to put glue on the proscenium arch, so I know that it's going to actually meet up with what I want. And also the very top, because you can adjust for glue later on if there's not enough, or if your measurements are slightly off. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm taking my first piece and I am going to attach that to the back, press down nice and firm so it stays. I'm going to do my other side here. And again, having the fan on isn't the best idea during this because it dries my glue really quick. But it'll work. All right, so now, and I can tell one guy is slightly off on that, so let's slide him up a little bit. There we go. So now, when you actually look at your stage, you now have your proscenium arch and your grand drape attached to your stage. Okay, so generally this just gives us an idea that the grand drape is here and it can be moved side to side to open. You can make these shorter if you want to, like half the size, if you want a bigger opening. Okay, but again, you're going to be able to look at it from all views. So I'm going to lay the front down just so it's out of my way, and we're going to start adding in our legs. So you've got 3, so you're going to have 3 on one side, you're going to have 3 on the other. So here you want to try to do them as even as possible. Okay, so generally I'll find something that is the width that I want. So let's see, I can actually, if I take that piece that we cut earlier from that long piece and cut this in half, I think that'll be perfect. Because it doesn't need much. All right, so I'm going to take this just as a measurement, and I am going to lay it down and just make a tiny mark where I want my legs to go. Now I'm going to do that on both sides, okay? They might be slightly off from each other, but it's not going to be perfect because I'm not using a ruler. So honestly, you can take your time on this project. I'm giving you the entire next 3 days to finish it because you'll have Saturday also before it is due. So if you want to make it nice and pretty and use different colors, by all means, go ahead and do that. You're more than welcome to, okay? I'm just using quick stuff. I have other cardstocks and colored paper and all that kind of stuff, but I'm just doing a general one for you guys right now. All right. So I made my tick marks on my paper on both sides. That lets me know where I'm going to glue my legs down. All right. So again, we are going to take these and we're going to fold the bottom edge about 1/2 inch. That tip that I gave you earlier, remember, I suggest gluing an edge down to your paper first and then folding it back just like we did our proscenium arch. It just helps, I think, a little better to make sure everything is pretty even. Okay, so that glue goes on the front. So about 1/2 inch, and take that and I'm gonna glue it right at the edge of my tick mark, the bottom of my tick mark. Give that a little time to dry. I'm gonna do the opposite side and I'm just gonna go back and forth gluing the 6 legs down. And this kind of works out better for you guys through video because in class I made an example and people were taking it all over the classroom everywhere. So people were like, where's the model? So this actually works out really well. So you guys get to see it directly on how it is made. And Tanya, theater is a lot of the time like arts and crafts, especially when it has to do with backstage. It's a lot of crafting. So if you guys wanted to take art, you definitely have segments of that in this class, especially when we get into tech work and we're designing and designing costumes and makeup designs and things like that. We do quite a bit of drawing in this class. Guys, don't worry if you don't know how to draw body forms. I don't know how to draw body forms. I use templates, so those will be available to you guys. All right, so I got 3 more to go. And since I'm going in a more of a zigzag pattern, it does give that glue a little bit more time to dry before I'm doing that folding back to make them stand up. And they will be around the same height as my proscenium. Again, this time I'm not using ruler. Most of the time I would to make sure everything's exact. Not really necessary right now. I also have little parts hanging off the edge of the paper. That is absolutely okay because generally afterwards I take my scissors and I run them down the edge to clear all that up because it tends to bother me later on. Not right when I'm making it, but later I'm like, oh, that's not right. So those of you that are like me that like everything nice and straight, scissors will be coming up at the end to clean those edges for you. And I can definitely tell my legs are not quite even, so I'm going to try to fix that as best as I can with this last one, which is why I'm thankful for erasable pens. All right. So starting with the very first one, I'm going to start laying these guys back. And that means the first one that you see, okay, not the very first one we glued, because you need to get them out of the way. So I'm going to fold that guy back. Then we have his partner on the other side. Be careful that you're not pulling it up because of the glue. You're going to do the next few. We might not even use our little fly rail parts. I don't think it's going to be necessary. I think we'll just go ahead and label on the floor because generally it would go all the way across. But I don't want to. I think it might look a little neater without it this time. Okay, so now I have all sections. He doesn't want to stay. Folded, okay, like so. So all 6 legs. So now if I put up my proscenium, and he likes to stay folded, so do his friends. but you get the general gist of that part and how it lays out. Okay. Later on, sometimes I do a little top piece to make sure that everything is nice and pretty if I want to keep it standing. Of course, if you want to have it folded and laying out of the way, it won't really matter. Okay, so I'm going to lay those guys out of the way for now, and you're going to grab that really big piece that we labeled Psych, and this guy is actually going to go another like little cubey section that we had away from your last leg. Okay, so make another mark for that. You can eyeball it if you want. Okay, as long as it reaches from side to side. Okay, make sure your label is facing the front. And again, we're going to have that bottom glue first so we can fold it back. I generally like to glue over scrap pieces. That way I'm not getting it all over my table. I'm not getting it all over my foldable so things don't start sticking together. So just make sure you guys are being nice and clean. Cleanliness is great. And I am going to line it up with my lines down below as best I can. And again, I was completely off on my marks. I don't know what's going on. But now I'm going to eyeball it and make it as straight as possible in the back because that's what makes me feel good. Now that that guy is glued down, I'm going to take him and I am going to fold him back just like I did everything else so that he will stand up nice and tall like his friends. Granted, they fall over all the time. And now he stands up along the back as well. So if I take my guys and I give them a nice little lay down, proscenium is usually the one that likes to fight a lot. We have our stage with all the pieces labeled for us to see. Okay, nice and viewable. So you have your actual stage floor and your psych and everything here. Obviously we can't put a grid up on top, but you know that, hey, that's up top. And if you want to make a little note of that in the back saying grid and an arrow up, you're more than welcome to. So now we're going to actually take a little bit of time to actually label the floor of our stage. And the reason why we wait until everything is glued is so we make sure that we're putting them in the right spots and we're not gluing over any words that we may have written. All right, so if you remember right, behind our psych, we have our little cross spacing back there where we store scenery or props or people walk behind very slowly to get to the other side of the stage. And that is called backstage. So you're going to label that nice and big so you can read it. Backstage. All right. Then you have your psych, and you have your first round of legs, and you have your second round of legs. Okay. So what I'm going to do is on stage right. So now you guys have the ability to actually turn this guy like you're looking through your stage and know your left and your right, so you can practice a little more there. So on stage right, in between my first and my second leg, I'm going to write the word fly across the top of the edge of the paper. And then between my second and my last leg on that same side, I'm going to write the word rail. Okay, so now when you look at it from the top, you know fly rail is generally up against the wall. It can be on either side, but I'm just always used to seeing it on this side. I don't know why. That's just me. All right, so we have that part done. So if we think about stuff that we had on that drawing that we filled out yesterday or the other day, depending on when you're watching this video, we have our wing spaces. And if you remember right, the wings are located on the sides that your audience cannot see with your legs because people are hiding back there. And we're going to go ahead and label in between, and it doesn't matter which set of legs you do it in between as long as you get it labeled on the correct side. You're going to label your stage right wing and you're going to label your stage left wing. If it helps you out, you guys can face it like you're looking through it towards the audience, so you make sure you get your left and your right correct. Again, completely up to you on this point, but all my writing is facing that way, so I just prefer everything facing the correct way. All right, so now I have labeled in between, and I just do it in the middle. Stage left wing and stage right wing. Okay. Now, if you look at your diagram that we drew out, we had something labeled right in the center that actually leads out to your spaces. We don't have to do that on this guy because we actually labeled our legs individually. Okay. Because now we are going to take the time to actually take this space in here, and it's going to look a little weird because we don't have that wide of a space right now because our legs are there, but we're going to draw out our 9 areas as best as we can. Okay, so go ahead and make your 9 boxes in that area. Again, a ruler if you want. I'm using my little trusty notepad to kind of get my lines good to go. So you have 3 going up and 3 going down. They do not travel off stage because our areas are where our actors are at. Like I said before, your areas can lead up into the apron, but if your stage doesn't have an apron, obviously you can't do that. So I'm actually starting my areas right behind the apron. Okay, it really doesn't matter where you start them at as long as you have those areas there. Okay, that's a preference sort of thing. And generally we won't use all the space all the way back up to the cyc. We don't want it tearing or anything like that because it costs a whole lot of money to replace. And what's cool is you kind of have your straight edges already there. If you lay your legs down, you have your straight edge to go ahead and draw your line down and your line across because it kind of meets up with the apron. And now I can see where my leveling is off, but it's fine. And make the rest of our checkers. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Mine definitely are not at this time at all. But it gives you a good idea of where everything is. Okay, so you're now going to label your stage areas. Again, if it is easier for you, you can turn it around to face the audience through the proscenium arch and make sure you get your left and your right correct. If you are choosing not to, just remember it is opposite what you think. So when you're writing on the right side, it's actually going to be the left on the stage. Remember, upstage is away and getting away from the audience. Downstage is getting up in their faces. All right, so I always start with center stage, so it's always known. And I do the shorthand, the abbreviations, versus writing that whole thing out, unless you really want to. But most of the time, we are going to abbreviate all our stage directions. So I generally like to label all my center stages first. And then I go to my 4 corners. Yeah, okay. Second guess myself. All right. And there will be one more thing that we label before we're finished. All right, so now if I lay all my guys back up again, which again, my proscenium doesn't like staying up because he's lazy. I now have my stage areas drawn out on my stage, and I have my actual stage to use, okay? Which is great for studying because you can physically get a sense of where everything is, and you can put yourself center stage. You can use a little marker guide too if you want to place in there and be like, okay, this is where I go and things like that. It's great for memorizing blocking and things like this. Actually, we have a couple of things to label real quick, maybe a few. Those are going to be mainly our invisible lines that we talked about earlier. But first, what is out in front of this apron? We have our house where our audience sits, so we have to label them. Okay, so you're just going to write house right below apron, off of the arch because they're not on stage with us. All right, I put little people just because I wanted to. But you are going to need to put at least one little person, and you're going to want to put him far over here. So think about where the edge of your curve of the apron is, and just draw a little circle there to represent somebody. I just generally do the circle and the triangle sort of thing. So you have a far person, because that is where one of our imaginary lines starts. We have our sight lines. Remember where the audience actually sees to, because wherever his point of view goes, I can see directly through here and see into the curtains on this side back here. So I know that as a designer, I got to make sure my set at least goes that far, or that I'm pulling those curtains in even closer so my audience cannot see backstage, because we might have people dressing back there. Okay, because there's no time to run to the dressing rooms and change most of the time. All right, so from my little guy here, I'm going to do dashes just like on the layout that you guys labeled during class. Again, using my trusty little notepad, and I am going to do a dashed line all the way up to meet the proscenium. Okay. And that means it is running through the apron. I'm actually going to have it run into my stage area so I can really tell how much that audience member can see. It may even be folding down some of those things so you can see exactly where their sight ends. And at the very edge of their sight, you're going to make your little arrow point so you know where they're looking. Now this might be a good thing to use a different color for this one so you can kind of distinguish it. I just like to fill in my arrow point so I know where they are looking. Okay, so if you look closely, I did it from about his eye view, straight up to where he can see. And I even went as far as folding these guys down and knowing how far he can actually see. Now, if I really wanted to get in depth, I could even make a few more arrows and show how far back he can see here and how far back he can see back here. But just for labeling purposes, you just need to know what a sight line is. The next line we are actually going to put is the invisible line that breaks the stage from the front extended part, our lovely apron. Okay, so that imaginary line has the same word that's from our arch, which is proscenium. And I'm going to label it right underneath here. You can label it across the front edge if you want to, but I have my dashed line there, so I don't want it there. You can even label it if you want right proscenium on one side and line on the other. Completely up to you. And I generally write it off of the apron. I don't want it on my apron just because it's messy to me. So proscenium line. Okay. And then of course you can do a little dashed arrow to know where your line is. Okay. So I have my proscenium line marked, knowing that it is right at the bottom of that proscenium arch. Okay, and I think, guys, we are finished.